Hey, welcome everyone. It's top of the hour and it's time for another Ecosystem Business Summit. We are really excited about our lineup today. People are still gathering and watching the attendance build here. So we're going to give everybody one more minute to join, and then we'll get started. See you in a minute. Hey everyone, welcome. Welcome to another Ecosystem Business Summit. We are really excited. We're going to just jump right in. Please, we've actually put a poll up. So if you would just take a quick look at the poll and answer. We're asking what your role is at your company, and so love to hear from you. Also, introduce yourself on the chat. So let us know where who you are, what your role is, and where you're joining in from. We have folks joining in from around the world. We have like over 500 registered today, so really excited to get going. We have, gosh, the folks that we have joining today are from software companies, hardware companies, telco companies, systems integrators, and kind of every kind of company in the technology world. So just welcome everybody, and we're so glad to have you here. Okay, so we did put up the poll, and if you would take a look at that at the poll. Oh, actually, we got another poll. What are the kinds of partner activities that you manage? Love to hear from that as well, and let us know that. It helps us understand who's joined today. And speaking of who's joining, we have one of the things that we're always really proud of about these events is that we have really senior folks that are joining. So we have over 27 C-level executives, 62 VPs registered, and then 155 directors. So really senior level of folks that are joined today. Okay, a few housekeeping things. Add your photo, if you would, to the into the environment, so that when you're using chat and interacting, we actually will. If you ask a question in chat, I will be putting your question up on the screen. So, and if you have your photo in there, then it'll show your photo as well. So, I'd love to do that. Introduce yourself, as I said a minute ago. Ask questions. We love to hear from the audience, and there's a lot of really great content. I'm sure it's gonna raise a lot of questions. So please don't be shy. Jump in and ask your questions. We will have polls and throughout the day, and the stage tab is where everything is happening. So click on the stage tab if you're not there already. Okay, we have a few things that we have put a lot of effort into and are really worth your time to take a look at. 3 documents that are just terrific assets. So the first is the ultimate guide to partner co-selling, and it's how to manage co-selling. Everyone is moving into this co-sell motion, which is very different from the traditional resell. We have a fantastic, I think it's 45 pages on this this document, how to co-sell with your ecosystem partners. We put the QR codes up there. You can just click it with your screen and download those. The second is the co-selling with hyperscalers, with cloud providers. If you're doing that or trying to understand how best to do that, some of the best practices, that document is fantastic. And then the third is the ecosystem maturity model. So we've developed a maturity model last year that really kind of helps you understand where you are along this pathway to managing your partners as an ecosystem. And so download that. It'll help you understand not only where you are, but where you are going, and help put everything into context. We have a fantastic agenda today, as I've said. Really excited that Amit Sinha, our president and co-founder, is going to kick us off with talking about ecosystem automation, sort of the state of the union, where things stand today. There's a lot of activity in the market, and Amit is going to put some good context to everything. And then Greg Serafin. Greg is an icon. Greg is global managing partner, EY Alliance Ecosystem at EY. And Greg and his team have been developing a lot of really tremendous thought leadership around ecosystems. And so Greg is going to be talking about mastering value orchestration, how CEOs go from chasing growth to orchestrating value, which is just tremendous. Mayank, our CEO and co-founder, Mayank Bawa, and Nirav Desai are going to be moderating that session. Nirav is our VP and head of our GSI business. And then we have Ria Shanmugam, who is joining us. Ria is Group Vice President, Global Alliances and Channels at New Relic, and is going to be taking us to the next level of the birth of ecosystem-led growth. And from a practitioner's level, how is New Relic managing their ecosystem? And Amit is going to come back and moderate that session. And then next, Marie Booth. Marie is Senior Director of Software Partner Monetization and Success at SAP. And Marie is going to talk about how do we actually implement this? How does this actually work in practice? And so Marie is talking about co-selling best practices to set your program up for success. And Teresa Colarusso, our VP of Customer Success, is going to be moderating that session. So we have a fantastic session. Without further ado, let's jump in. Actually, I'm going to do a quick, before we get started, I'm going to run a quick video of some customers, and here we go.
The obvious is how much business have we closed together? What does our pipeline look like? Those are, as old as it gets in enterprise software. Sources of the revenue, who brought the opportunity to the table? Was it Wipro? Was it the technology vendor? I'm happy to say that on that front, we're working closely with WorkSpan, and we've enabled with you guys bi-directional pipeline sync and lead sharing, which has actually begun to bear fruit as well. So those are table stakes.
But you can only hire so many people, right? Mm-hmm. So we look for automation, which is where WorkSpan came in. There are constant updates that need to be made to each opportunity. Right. And without WorkSpan, we wouldn't be able to do that. We wouldn't be able to scale for the growth that we are projecting, which we did a poor job of in the beginning. We grew before we scaled. Now we're stepping back and looking at, to hit these growth goals, what do we need to do to scale in the beginning? And that's through automation and going digital.
In PXP, in the platform, what these guys have to do is create an integrated partner plan. If we see from one partner that they want to focus on this opportunity, and then we use the power of AI again and bring it through the WorkSpan platform, we can push out even more opportunities because we have those insights right now. Of course, we leverage then with WorkSpan, the platform, to coordinate those selling motions across Cisco, reseller, eco-seller, system partner sellers. So I think this is going to be super fun, I have to say.
The winning qualities of WorkSpan, I know I listed many already, but it was not only the native integrations you have with CRM tools, but it's also the network platform that you have. The fact that when we looked at our over 100 alliance partners, more than half of them were already on your platform. And that mattered to us. One, because the partners that we respect also have trusted WorkSpan for their activities, but also the fact that it would be just that much easier to use WorkSpan as a tool because half of our partners are already on it.
Okay. All right. Let's get going. Ahmed, I think let's bring you in, and I'm going to let you take it away, and off we go. Thanks, Ahmed.
Thank you, Chip. A warm welcome to everybody. I see people from all corners of the world have joined. A warm shout out to Edwin in Kenya. Baz, welcome. I remember Hana on AWS. You and I put that on the world map together. Roland, warm welcome. Fortinet, recognize the early partnership across various roles, Roland, you've had. And there are so many more. So this is about the community getting together. So I encourage you to kind of network and meet each other as a community as well. And as we come out of the pandemic, we'll also take this event to meet face to face as well, and look forward to doing that in a session shortly. The first one, I'm going to talk about the state of the ecosystem movement today, especially focusing on ecosystem automation. Later today, we have a distinct pleasure of having Greg Sarafin, managing partner at EY, come and talk about the message to CEOs and how they are embracing ecosystem-led models. But there was a very interesting study that came out very recently. In the survey, they said, and they found out after polling CEOs worldwide, that the ecosystem era has truly arrived. 71% of the companies are saying that ecosystems are extremely important of how their companies are currently successful or not. And it's no doubt that the 7 of the top 10 companies in the world today are ecosystem-led companies. And what is really interesting about this study is companies that are doing ecosystems well, they have figured out a recipe to do it well. They are actually making 2.1 times more revenue than others who are not doing so. So imagine the top line. They're actually growing twice as much as others in the industry. And on the bottom line, right, they also have a distinct cost advantage. The fact that you're combining assets, the fact that you're combining forces in doing what you do best and then partnering for the rest, if you will, you have a much better cost model in the industry as well. 1.5x lower cost. So 2.1 better in revenue, 1.5 better on cost. So imagine the multiple, the value unlocked. And I think that's the message on the ecosystem side, that these are very important business models, revenue models, not just in tech, but in general in the world today that is overtaking us. And we got to get better at how we create value from it, how do we capture value from it, and how do we actually enable our teams to work and span boundaries across the various work that we do in service of end customers. It's truly the end customers who are at the center of this network. And everybody has to combine, because this is an unrealistic, a dream that one company can do it all. In the service of the shared end customer, faster innovation, lower cost, lower risk, candidly speaking, when companies combine together. This is how we deliver value. And I think this is an important message that came out from the EY study. Chip, if you go to the next one, there's another very interesting conclusion that came out, which I love. Number one is, it's not just to create an ecosystem model, but also how to care and feed for it. If you start from the lowest point here, the bottom of the screen here, what you see is that you need to have an ecosystem-focused organization. It's somebody who lives and breathes partnering, somebody who truly understands the partner's evolving business models and can meet the partner where their business model is at. And while doing so, they have metrics, they have an ability to actually recognize which partners are creating value or co-creating value and which ones are not. And ultimately, it's about empowering that organization with the right leadership and the right budget. So after Greg talks about the CEO impact and the how come CEOs are embracing this, we have a very delightful example with Ria from New Relic. She's come in as the head of partnering ecosystem there, combining ecosystems and channels. And through the leadership, how ecosystem-led growth has happened and unleashed at New Relic is a great example to see and witness in terms of when an organization comes together, empowers a team to go after revenue with partners, co-creating, co-marketing, co-selling together, great growth is possible. And not only that, the ecosystem leaders are now presenting at the board level. And when they're presenting and talking and showing value in a quantified way, you can see that companies that empower that, 71% of the high performing ecosystems actually review ecosystem performance at the board level, which means they have metrics. So if you go back to SAP, for instance, we have Marie Booth later on coming today. If you look at the CEO dashboard at SAP, ecosystems is very, very high priority there. In fact, Carl Farbach was speaking yesterday or day before yesterday at the ecosystem economy, acceleration economy with some of the analysts. And he said, the idea is to move SAP from a partner-centric, customer-centric model to a partner-led model. And I think this is a very, very interesting change in the industry, that CEOs and partner leaders are recognized and reviewed metrics, empowerment, budgets at the ecosystem leadership level. And I think this change is really welcome for the state of the ecosystem today, that we have empowered leaders across organizations now coming up. And they're demanding that we have automation, we have metrics, that we have processes that actually take care of such things. But these leaders and organizations are meeting the challenges today. If you look at what kinds of challenges, these are the 5 things that we frequently hear from leaders and their organizations today. Number 1, we are mired in old ways of thinking in terms of types of partners and tiers of partners. There are many diverse types and tiers. Business models are changing. No reseller wants to be a pure reseller. No services company wants to just do services. They want to own IP, and so on and so forth. So there's a huge gap there, that the flexibility, the fluidity that is needed in ecosystem models today to serve an end customer is not enabled. And I think if we can imagine a world where flexibility to have any partner business model, how partners want to actually work with you, what they want to co-build, co-market, or co-sell with you. That's what's important. No partner wakes up in the morning and says, hey, I'm a diamond partner and I'm at this tier of a partnership. That doesn't happen. Next is we are mired in legacy tools, and there are diverse partner portals out there, and all of them have amazing experiences at the end of the day. But the reality is that a partner has to wake up every morning, figure out how to work with one partner versus another one. And that's just the external diversity, leave alone the internal diversity of tools that you have. So imagine a different world instead, on a shared network to connect with any company and to connect with any ecosystem professional to get the work done. And that's the simplicity that we could aspire for. The third challenge that I've heard, and this is loud and clear, is patchy security and governance. So as you start working with partners, of course, we have legal frameworks like NDAs and others that are formed early in the partnership. But in reality, living the partnership requires you to share people, process data in a sustainable way, in a legally sensitive, but also competitively sensitive way. And I think a lot of these policies get invented on the fly with a specific partnership or with a specific individual. But we imagine a world where we could work with any company, where each company's team members are joining with their single sign-on, so that we know that indeed they are still part of the same company that we work with, that there's data security and privacy policies at the central level applied, which doesn't allow you to invent the policy on the fly with every partnership. It's consistent and evident to everybody how you work. And the other one that we see commonly today is manual swivel chair automation. Partner managers, partner business managers, business development managers are still looking at their CRM and entering data manually here, and doing so every week for 52 weeks. And they lose up to half a day every week just looking at data, bringing data over, copying stuff over from their systems. And these are complex processes, and each company's processes are not standardized today. And lack of this kind of standardization hampers all of us, because we are paying one ecosystem manager, one partner business manager at a time, by re-entering, by updating stale information, working on stale information. But on the contrary, imagine if we were to work in a cross-company workflow that simplifies all of this thing. And then lastly, metrics. So many ecosystem leaders have come back and told us that, hey, wish we had metrics that are standardized. So we know how to measure sales today in terms of revenue contribution. We know ARR. We know, in marketing qualified leads and sales accepted leads. There's standard terminology there. So in the ecosystem world, we need similar terminology that really helps us understand all of this. So imagine a world where we could start to measure teams, measure partnerships on this basis. So the state of the ecosystem union here is that these are the challenges, and there are early majority companies that are able to kind of figure this out. And these are the companies that are getting the 2.1x revenue growth and 1.5x lower cost, essentially. And underlying this is a larger trend that we see. So just if we talk about Jay McBain calling this the decade of the ecosystem, and Chris Weber at IDC and Steve White at IDC talking about this as ecosystem value unlocked. We are seeing in this decade, just as we saw in the prior 2 decades, there was Salesforce automation with, Salesforce, of course, leading the way, year 2000 and 2010. We all knew that direct sales became quantified, their workflows were automated, there was no manual data entry, metrics got standardized, and along with it, the chief revenue officer role came in. Like I was still there when sales reported to operations in many companies. Now you cannot imagine the head of sales not being empowered at the board level. And that's what Salesforce automation and the sales-led movement brought there. Harken to 2010 onwards, we had marketing automation. At a time when CMOs didn't report again to the board, often they would not know which part of marketing worked. Now you have automated marketing flows. We've gone to the other extreme, in my opinion, but the idea that we can optimize cookies, we can think about marketing metrics and the role of the chief marketing officer and getting the budget, candidly speaking, more budget than CIOs, in fact, to drive marketing. That's really what happened in the last decade. This decade, what we are seeing is that this is a must-have for partner professionals, ecosystem automation, just as marketing automation and sales automation is important for sales and marketing professionals. We are seeing the early majority of companies actually put in these cross-company workflows, data security, privacy policies codified, standard metrics kind of emerging, and this role of the chief partner officer, chief ecosystem officer that Greg talked about or will talk about. So this role is now pretty important in companies, and we are seeing rise of the chief partner officer in many, many companies, and you will see this in this decade as much. So again, a lot of empowerment coming in the ecosystem state of the union. There are 5 capabilities that we've started benchmarking companies on, and the level of automation they've reached in that. First is people. Are they able to connect with any company out there, and are they able to work with people in a multi-party ecosystem? Here again, the idea here is with security, with single sign-on and things like that. Second is in the area of workflows. Do you have broken workflows? Do you have workflows that just stop at your company boundaries? It's a system for you, but not necessarily shared with a partner. And in this case, do these processes actually cross company boundaries? Third one is in data. Do you have data sharing rules in place? Do you have a data hub where you are kind of bringing your own data to bear to a business process, but also increasing data feeds and API feeds from partners that are improving the insights that you can get? Are you getting the data from more partners? And this is a very interesting insight. With Apple and others kind of cracking down on marketing technologies such as cookies and others, we are seeing the second party data, which is your partner's data, play an increasingly important role in signals. So it's just not your data. If you work with, let's say, 100 partners, you have 100x more data than you can imagine. And these kinds of insights are you leveraging in your recommendations, for example? Cisco is a fantastic example of this, putting this in play. And that's where you can benchmark yourself on medium to low or high in terms of maturity. And lastly, security and access. Do you have access and security and controls in place that do that? So there was a very interesting paper, Ecosystem Business Maturity Model, that Chip showed at the beginning. So these are the 5 metrics that we 5 areas where we evaluate and show the maturity in terms of whether you have these systems and processes in place that can take you from an early maturity level to a very, very advanced maturity level. So I encourage you to look at that paper And today we have an interesting the most important announcement that we're going to make today with this event. The announcement is the availability of the WorkSpan CoSell app. As you've known, WorkSpan has offered a CoSell platform for a long time for some of the largest ecosystems in the world, such as those at AWS, Microsoft, and other cloud providers. We have SAP, for example, Cisco, Deloitte, Kyndryl, large GSIs and ISVs, but also fast-growing startups, companies like Wiz, Orca Security, Palo Alto Networks, Databricks, MongoDB, things like companies like that. The idea here is we're taking this secure enterprise-grade CoSell platform that is already doing close to 50 billion in CoSell pipeline worldwide, and now making it available for any CoSell partnership. And this is phenomenal because any company, any size, you can now get WorkSpan, you can plug in and then play with anybody on the WorkSpan network. And the connections are only once, and it deploys quickly. 2 to 4 weeks is the standard time for doing this. And the idea is very simple. It connects to your CRM. Let's say you run Salesforce, it connects to your Salesforce on one side, but on the partner side as well, it connects to theirs. And as a result, it's a completely automated system. You're not manually shuttling data and stuff like that. It's a bidirectional integration on both sides. This gives you the real-time dashboards and performance metrics and standard metrics, talking about standardization of how you measure it. As a single solution for scale to any number of partners. So you can start small, you can then scale it to any company, any GSI, ISV, hyperscaler partner that you work with. So that's the announcement. It's out there, WorkSpan CoSell app. Go give it a shot. And we actually have an offer for companies who want to try this out. Chip, if you go to the next slide, please. And we talked about these capabilities of the CoSell app that is unique. So one is you're joining a multi-party ecosystem. So here you can work with any partner. Either you can, if you don't see somebody, you can invite that partner into the WorkSpan platform, and then you can start to work with them. Second is these are best-in-class CoSell workflow processes. We've perfected them. The stages in these workflows, the business actions that come out of it now come out of the box. You don't have to think about it. Third is it connects to, as I mentioned, to your Salesforce, but also to the partner Salesforce system. And as a result, it has got a real-time feed of information that the ecosystem professionals can rely on. And it comes with dashboards and metrics automatically baked into it. So again, you don't have to, you get a fantastic starting point that can jumpstart your ecosystem journey with CoSell, as an example. And as before, very secure, and you get to work with your single sign-on as well as the partner single sign-on. And this is how it works. Very simple, join WorkSpan, start a CoSell program, connect to your Salesforce system, for example, invite partners. You can invite a CSP, a GSI, an ISV, managed service provider, hardware company that you work with, anybody you CoSell with. There are so many business models around CoSelling. And they see your invite, they join the same network. It's very simple. Within 5 minutes, they're onboarded. And the idea here is not only they can just, for example, if you look at the last visual there, you can manually enter information. You can also enter bulk information in spreadsheets, but the best experience is when you connect your Salesforce to it. We also have on our roadmap, today we connect bidirectionally with Salesforce with native experience. We also have on our roadmap HubSpot, Dynamics, and other CRMs as well. So this is game-changing. It's true bidirectional CRM capability for any partnership out there. And since you're here, one of the key offers today that we are talking about is this. So kickstart your CoSell program with 5. We are going to give this offer to the first 25 companies. Literally, we just came out of this exercise with the first 5, and amazing results already. So it's $5K a month, and the idea is very simple. You connect your CRM, you get your CoSell opportunities up and running, invite partners. They get to also get a free CRM implementation on their CRM side, and we will also give them the first year for free if they opt into this program. So it's it's of course you're paying for the 5 partners, but your partners join for free. They get an entire full year for free, including the connection to the Salesforce application. And for the second year, they can opt in to pay or not to pay. So a no-brainer, essentially. Very, very excited with this. I wanted to welcome everybody again. And we have a fantastic lineup of speakers next. And with that, Chip, I want to bring you back in.
That was fantastic, Amit. And actually, we did have a question that came in from the audience. So it's a little bit of a long one, but George, thank you for asking. Hi, Amit. While getting all partners to agree on sharing a baseline set of data to enable automation, is there a place where we can make an early start? Can we do a show and tell with partners to convince them that digitization and automation are all good for ecosystem growth?
Yeah, that's precisely what we're offering with this 5-partner thing. So let's connect offline. The fact that we have a template and a base model ready to go. This is something that you adopt yourself first, and then invite the 5 partners, as we mentioned. So definitely, we can talk more about this.
Fantastic. Keep the questions coming. And Amit, thank you so much. We'll see you in just a few minutes. I'm going to run another quick 2-minute video with some customers, and we'll bring Greg and Mayank and Nirav in. Thanks, Amit.
Increased our revenue through marketplaces by more than 10x over last year, and I'm expecting similar growth through the marketplace next year. Well, not 10x next year, but expecting growth there again is because we're monitoring and seeing that our sales cycles are lower. I mean, this is one of the reasons we went with WorkSpan, because frankly, my team couldn't manually enter the stuff in the partner deal registration systems fast enough. It's just too manual. So WorkSpan lets me go, oh, if it's in the POC stage or this, and this in our sales cycle, push it into the partner portal. And that lets me force that influence side of the equation, and then I can monitor it.
The experience has been fantastic so far, right? And what we need now is information all the time, information real time, not only between the customer and SAP, but as well including the ecosystem, right? And I think that's what WorkSpan can provide.
For those of you that are thinking about WorkSpan, just the elimination of spreadsheets, the ability to interact and collaborate on a specific deal. That's not sort of the center of the goal, but its impact alone is pretty valuable. Because you've got traceability, you've got at least a common set of agreed upon pieces of data. You've got control of what you need, and that's been impactful for us.
We need to get tooling out of the way. If you're co-selling with us at scale, those integrations and workflows need to feel natural for your sellers, so they can focus on the deal and not on the mouse clicks. And in this, WorkSpan has really come through with a powerful solution that creates that connective tissue between your organization and ours. And so having WorkSpan as a partner that helps us overcome those challenges has been really fantastic.
Okay. All right. Let's welcome. Okay, Greg, Mayank, Nirav, welcome everybody. I'm glad to have you here. I'm going to put up your Greg. I know you have some slides as well, so I'm going to bring up your slides here, and I'll let you guys take it away from here.
Thank you, Chip. Hi, EBS. I'm so thrilled to introduce Greg Serafin to you. Greg is Global Managing Partner at EY, and EY is Global Alliance and Ecosystem Leader. In this role, Greg oversees strategy, enablement, and value creation derived from alliances, and included in that are joint business relationships more broadly. Greg has had a fantastic career leading up to this role, having a diversity of experiences, including starting a company and then heading one of the professional services P&L for one of the top units at IBM in North America. Greg has a unique strategic view of ecosystems and their role in unlocking value and scaling it for extreme advantage. That Greg will talk through, and then we will have a robust question and answer session with them. So, Greg, over to you.
Thanks very much. I really appreciate everybody's time, particularly whoever's in Australia. Wow. I hope this is valuable to you across the presentations today. So hi, everybody. I am Greg. I have just finished 8 years with EY as a partner, and before that I was an executive at IBM. My career actually started 40 years ago. I sold my first deal, my unc, in May of 1983, which shocks me to say. Although I also say I'm only 2/3 of the way through my career, so I still plan to go for quite some time. Most of my career has been leading business functions of some sort or another. I did do a startup, as you noted, my unc. It was not successful. So my hat's off to anybody like you that has created a successful and long-lasting startup. I really appreciate the effort and the ingenuity and so forth that needs to go into making that happen. So I'll just tell a little bit about why I'm here today talking about this. Like many of you in this community, I am responsible for partnering at my company. And I'll be very direct with you. I was drafted into that role 6 years ago. I did not seek to be the head of partner ecosystem at EY or anywhere in my career. It's a role that I viewed as risky, frankly. I'd come from direct sales roles, CRO roles, and account management roles, and there was a certain, and there still is a certain, in some industries, stigma attached to the function of running the partner ecosystem, the alliances, the channels, whatever words you use. And so I was frankly concerned, Mayank, about what that would mean in terms of my ability to impact client value and shareholder value in my company. Turns out I needn't have worried. I probably joined at the right time. As we've noted at the start of this call, we are entering an era of partnering as a primary route to working capital sharing and value creation. And I entered, just as I think that trend was really starting to pick up. And when I took my role, I went to the board after 60 days of reflection. I got 60 days to come up with a quote strategy. At the time, EY was a $33 billion business entity and was only doing about $1 billion a year in partnering revenues, which was a laggard amongst our peers for sure. Many of whom were in the 20 to 50% range, depending on who you looked at. But more importantly, we were missing an opportunity to serve our clients better than we were, because we all know that clients ultimately are looking for value. They're looking for you to bring value to them. And they don't necessarily view the value you bring to them as just the value within the four walls of your company. They expect you to bring something broader to them. And that, of course, has been an increasing trend as well, certainly in the professional services industry. So I went to the board and said, all right, well, if you give me certain authority and certain investment and so forth, I will commit to 30% CAGR over 8 years. So from fiscal year 18 to fiscal year 25, we're just finishing fiscal year 23 now. We'll grow from $1 billion to $8 billion. We'll grow to 15% of our revenues. We will have client impact and, blah, blah, blah. So that was where this all started. Now, was I confident about the 30% CAGR? I was reasonably comfortable making that ambitious statement, but because I knew what our peers were doing and so forth. But still, it was probably one of the more audacious things I ever committed in my career, certainly in front of a board. I'm happy to report it worked out well. We will finish this fiscal year 23, so 6 years into the journey, at a 38% CAGR, finishing at about $7.5 billion. Now, there's still a lot more to go. That's going to be about 15% of our revenue this year. But the more important thing that I look at is the impact. what are the things we're doing in the market for our clients? It's not just the top line, but it's also the bottom line of the impact that we're having. And that's where I really feel very proud of the accomplishments of our team, and us as an organization overall, in pivoting our mindset and our thoughts about how we create value to increasingly be about partnering towards that value versus doing it just on our own. So that's a little bit of context about how I came to be here. The other piece of context I'll give you is, yeah, my day job is, overseeing the EY partner ecosystem. So I do all the things that probably many of you do. I do all the core enablement of all our relationships. We have 100 plus relationships now in our partner ecosystem. So all of them are important to, in some form or fashion, to somewhere in EY. And so we have a shared service and technology platform that we use to enable and serve all of our relationships. And then I pay particular attention to what we call our tier one relationships. So these are our most strategic global partners with whom we do the largest proportion of our co-investment, co-innovation, co-marketing, co-selling, et cetera. And so those are a direct responsibility of mine, and I have relationship handling teams around those relationships around the world. Again, as many of you probably do. About 3 years into my role, we were on a maturity journey because we had almost zero maturity, and we were trying to, over the course of 8 years, get to a new definition of majority 5. Frankly, we wanted to actually lead the market ultimately, not just catch up to it. I realized because we had a partnership with a non-technology company, Procter & Gamble, that this was a very different kind of partnership than I had been used to up until that point. And I was probably missing something by just being myopically focused on the way we always partnered in the professional services industry with the way technology companies always partner. And so I set on a journey of taking a step back and saying, well, what is partnering? Are we being too myopic about how we think about partnering? Are there different ways of partnering that create value in channels and means that we don't do today, et cetera? So that is where I sort of went down the path of, okay, what should we be doing and how should we be thinking about it? And how should this be more of an overall corporate imperative and corporate strategy? And ultimately, not just for EY, but for our customers as well. Because if it's important for EY to partner to create value, isn't that also true of all of our customers? Shouldn't they also be thinking about customering to produce value? And so we started doing research. You referenced one of our more recent research studies, that CEO study that we did last year. We've done others. We've also worked with analysts. And that led us to publish a number of thought pieces. And those thought pieces then led to me getting pulled into meetings with initially tech company CEOs who wanted to understand, okay, how do you think differently about partnering than we think about partnering? But then it was interesting. I started getting pulled into meetings with non-tech company CEOs, pharma companies, energy companies, logistics companies, and so forth, who also wanted to understand, what is this partnering thing? Because we're hearing about it. Analysts are talking about it. We know it's a thing. We know that there are a lot of partner-led or ecosystem-led businesses out there, but they're all born in the cloud, aren't they? And then it really doesn't apply to our industry, or does it, or how does it, and so forth. So then we started to say, all right, how, working with our strategy team, UI Parthenon, how can we sort of make sense of all this and put this together in a way that CEOs can understand? Because quite candidly, Mike, when I used to talk to CEOs, I would talk about what I did and what EY did and what a partner ecosystem function was. And I could tell in those conversations something was missing. And so what I'm going to share with you now is what was missing, what has now resonated with CEOs, and has also even sort of galvanized us internally to realize what our role is. And then relate it back to all of us in this community, about the importance of what we do and why what we're doing is so relevant to the C-suite, to the board, and to the capital agenda of every company in the world, not just the ones we serve, but every company in every industry. So that's a little bit of background. So without further ado, I'll just quickly get into how I just position this with CEOs. So the first thing I'll say is, look, I know you want to talk about partnering, but partnering is just a means to the true end. And the true end is something we call value orchestration. And value orchestration really comes about at the convergence of 3 forces that are happening today in the world. The first everybody is aware of, it's the ubiquitous availability of connected infrastructure. you can literally set up a business overnight that's global in scale, has no limits on data storage, CPU, etc., connectivity. But that also means that companies can do things together at a much more meaningful level, much more quickly, much lower cost than they ever could before because of this ubiquitous, cost-effective infrastructure. So that's one mega trend or force that has been sort of driving us in a direction. Another is that we are seeing, particularly because of entering the age of social responsibility and building that into the capital agenda, that the traditional ways of measuring cost of capital and return of capital are no longer sufficient. Things like routes to circularity and alternative things like the value of data, the value of IP, and other things are increasingly part of the calculation of capital value and value exchange between parties. It's no longer just about flows of money. And so that's another mega trend that's happening that's been really fueled by ESG regulation. And then I think the real mega trend that's sort of related to these other two is this sort of pivot from buying products and services to buying value outcomes with frictionless digital experiences, right? So all of us experience this both in our lives as consumers as well as our lives as buyers of services in the context of whatever business function we serve. And we all know the examples. I'll give just one as illustrative. If you're in the automobile industry today, you're selling automobiles. Tomorrow, will people be buying automobiles, or were they buying mobility experiences? And a mobility experience might include things like, hey, this week I need to travel up to the country. I need a pickup truck to haul some stuff. Next week I need a sports car to drive around. I need a limo in 2 weeks to drive me to the airport, etc. Instead of buying one vehicle or two vehicles, why don't I have the vehicle I need show up when I need it? And sometimes it'll have a driver and sometimes it won't. Well, that is a very complicated thing to do, yet that is probably where most analysts think that the industry is going. And so how do you, as a maker of automobiles, remain relevant if you could just end up being a supplier to whoever is ultimately providing that mobility experience? So this is the big pivot that we're seeing, and there's a version of that in every single industry. I won't go into all of them, but all of you serve industries, and I'm sure you can see, if you haven't already discussed in your own organizations, where these things are going. So those are the three mega trends. So if we go to the next slide, just two more slides, and then we'll get into the discussion. So we're underneath this, what we're doing is we're pivoting from industry value chain models, right, where the product and service is the center of focus, right, with customers being the marketplace from which to take share. Now, when I say the words industry value chain, what I mean is things like automotive, insurance, healthcare, etc. Ultimately, they end up in a consumer buying something and or a government buying something on behalf of their citizens. But then there's another type of value chain that's equally important. Actually, it's probably more important to most of the people in this audience. It's what we call the functional value chain. So industry value chain serves consumers and gives sort of the things that consumers use in their daily lives. A functional value chain is really about B2B, and it's about selling value to the finance function or the tax function or the HR function and so forth, right? So that's the B2B side of value chains. Many of us in this community probably at a minimum serve the B2B, but in some cases may also serve the B2B industry value chains. The point I'm making, though, is that these models are still about the product or service. They're not about the value outcome. If you go to the next slide, the big pivot that we're seeing, right, is that there's an opportunity for these intermediaries, these value orchestrators, to come in and create that value outcome for whoever the end client is. It could be consumer, or it could be the chief finance officer, or it could be some other buyer, either in a B2B or B2C context. And that value orchestrator is bringing together a lot of industry or functional value chains in order to create that outcome. So if I go back to the automobile to mobility experience, right, automobiles are just a part of the mobility experience. You also need to bring the insurance in. You need to bring the financing in. You need to build the maintenance and the service in. You need to build the IoT and the measurement and so forth in, right? And so those come from a bunch of different industry and functional value chains that the value orchestrator stitches together. So when I have this discussion with CEOs, they go, okay, I get that. I see that. So what's the link? And of course, the answer is the link is in order to be a value orchestrator, you need to be really good at partnering because these are primarily partnering strategies. They are not purely build and buy strategies. You're not, as Mercedes-Benz, going to build an insurance company and a bank and a network of maintenance trucks that are going to go around and service the vehicles and so on and so forth and so on. You don't have the capital. You don't have the time. So either you're going to orchestrate it or somebody else will, and then you'll get pushed back in the value chain that you are at the front of today. And then they go, okay, so now tell me more about partnering. And that's when we get into the discussion of what we all do in this community, which is partnering needs to be a function of your company, just like finance is a function of your company, tax, HR, IT, right? It needs to be something you major in. It's not something you minor in. And that function of your company is strategic. It's not secondary. And therefore, you need to elevate it to your C-suite. It is on par, if not more important now, with product development, which you might call innovation. You might call it R&D. You might call it the function of your chief product officer. Might be a combination of those things. It's on par with product. It's on par with corporate development. So transactions, arguably even more important in this model. And then if a CEO says, well, what if we don't anticipate being a value orchestrator? That's fine, but you're still going to be orchestrated. So if you want to even be a participant as the orchestrated versus the orchestrator, guess what? You still need to be good at partnering. And the reality is for most companies to be relevant, you're going to need to do both. In some cases, you're going to be part of the value orchestration. In other cases, you will just be part of the orchestrated. But either way, you're going to need to major in partnering. You need a chief partner ecosystem officer. And they're going to need all the things that we talked about even earlier in this discussion. You're going to need to automate that function. Every function needs its digital platform, its digital core. You know, SAP, who's another guest today, has very successfully positioned itself as the 70% market holder for the digital core for the finance function. On the revenue side, we know that Salesforce has, the majority market for revenue management and CRM, and, you can go down the line. So there is certainly a need for digitizing these processes and even defining these processes and defining the KPIs, right? So when I talk to CEOs, I say, look, we've grown at a 38% CAGR, but at what cost? Well, the indirect cost of our growth has been about 0.5 point of earnings per year. So that's all the middle and back office functions that we do to enable partner ecosystem. Then the other cost we have is cost of sales. So that's all the relationship handling, go-to-market, et cetera. There, we don't measure it as a pure cost. We measure it as a ratio of cost to earnings growth. And our last fiscal year, for every dollar we spent in relationship handling and go-to-market in our partner ecosystem, we returned $5 of earnings growth to the company, right? So that's the other thing that really gets CEOs to take note is, oh, you're not just running a function that the way we used to think about it, which is you're like an overlay. We can't really articulate what your value is. You're running the function and you're running it on a set of KPIs and metrics that are measurable, provable, and demonstrable of the value that you're creating. And, oh yeah, by the way, you're unlocking your ability to be value orchestrators or at a minimum participate in value orchestration models effectively. So that is a real quick run through of what I usually take a couple of hours to take CEOs through. But since all of you are in this community, I'm sure that you're kind of connecting the dots here and resonating with some of this, I hope. And with that, Mayank, I'll stop talking and I'll start listening and discussing and answering any questions people might have as a result of that.
Hey, Greg, that was a fantastic set of slides that primed our conversation. So before I dive into the first question, now let me introduce Nirav Desai, who's at Workspan. He's our Vice President of Consulting and SI Ecosystem. And Nirav has a rich history in working with many of our Many companies in the SI and consulting ecosystem, and he understands how these trends apply to that segment of the market. So welcome, Neerav.
Awesome to have you, Greg. I know always, it's a privilege to work with you and many of your peers in the industry as well. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Greg, you made a couple of remarkable points. Let me start with one. Right, traditionally, partnering has been thought of as an overlay service function to sales or marketing or product development.
Right.
If you're on the build side.
Yes.
And as ubiquitous digitized infrastructure becomes available and the cost of transacting across company boundaries decreases, many strategic roles can now be played through orchestrating value directly for the customer, not just creating value for an internal function. And that radical shift allows partnering teams to position themselves or start new initiatives that directly unlock value for the parent company, right? And not through unlocking value or making efficient of another function uh, more efficient, but rather directly contributing to the CEO's objective or the CEO's core.
That's right.
So is there a need to change our vocabulary as partnering leaders of how we communicate what we do internally to get a seat at the CXO table and elevate our partnering initiatives to be core company initiatives? What advice would you have for the functional partnering leaders who are in this audience today?
Well, I don't know that I recommend you go talk to your CEO about value orchestration. That might be a long stretch from where you are to having that conversation. But here's what I would recommend, and this is what I did, frankly. First thing you need to do is to be very clear that you're orchestrating a set of business processes, right? You are a function, whether you're recognized as a formal function or not. You are running a function of your company. There's a set of processes that function is responsible for, as the steward of. Those processes cross into other functions of your company. They cross into your direct sales, they cross into your marketing, they cross into your product development, they cross into finance, revenue rec, tax, etc. But you should be really clear about what those processes are, and you should start to measure and make those processes apparent to people, because often they're invisible. Second, you should be really clear about the value that you're creating, right? You're not just a route to market, you are a route to value, and you should be articulating what that value is, particularly in terms of what is the incremental value you're creating. Because it goes back to that fear I had 6 years ago. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to be an overlay now, right? What did I do wrong in my career? And it took a while before I realized, no, we're bloody not an overlay. We're actually creating net new value. We're just really bad at communicating it, both to ourselves and to the market. So get really good at communicating the value that you're creating and quantifying it. And then, most importantly, connect that back to the cost that you are, because you are probably viewed, as I am, as a drag on earnings, right? You're an SG&A cost. You're certainly not cost of goods sold. Never are, right? Or rarely are, I should say, not never. And so, as an indirect cost, you are a drag on earnings ultimately, and therefore you're implicitly a capital allocation. You're a component of the capital allocation strategy or resource allocation strategy of your organization. So, articulating how how you're spending that earnings, which is an opportunity cost for the firm, and returning on that earnings. That's why I threw out those two metrics that I think are important, right? And by the way, separating SG&A, separating the S and SG&A from the G&A. G&A is an indirect cost. Your job is to drive that to zero. At EY, we have got 75 people in a shared service team in India, and in the Philippines, we've spent $15 million on tech. We're now hopefully about to close something with WorkSpan to include that in our tech stack, right? Because at the end of the day, we've digitized the heck out of our processes internally. What WorkSpan will do, of course, is allow us to digitize our processes externally as well. Right. That's ultimately the interesting thing about this function is you're the stewards of business processes that are both internal and external across multiple partners. Right. So these are the things that I would recommend to us as stewards of these functions is to start to really articulate that running a function. Don't necessarily call yourself a chief partner ecosystem officer yet, or talk about value orchestration, but demonstrate that you're orchestrating value, that you're enabling value orchestration, and give hard KPIs for the money you're spending and the return the organization is getting on that spend in terms of incrementality, incremental value to the organization, not just an overlay.
Spot on, Greg. I think this is a very timely conversation to have, especially in this year when people are fearing recession. There are companies are cutting costs and figuring out who plays a core function where they need to invest, and then everybody else who needs to cut, right? And so in that environment, understanding the initiatives that the partnering team has, the business processes that the partnering team owns that delivers those initiatives, that contributes directly to the corporate objective or the business strategy that is playing out in each company, becomes very relevant. And towards that point, how to communicate that value along with metrics and cost indicators. I think that builds a
It's
good case.
critical, right? Resource allocation at any company is always a challenge. Everybody's claiming what they do is important. It needs to be funded. Often capital allocation, it can be a beauty contest at many companies, as can budget allocation. And so in order to get an appropriate allocation for the function that you are the steward of, you need to articulate that value very clearly. And not to put too fine a point on it, when everybody comes to me and says, well, we need to reduce the cost of this function, I go, okay, so tell me what you're spending $1 on that's going to return you more than $5 of earnings growth. And it very quickly becomes a different conversation, right? And so that is what, really turned the tide in terms of, how we at EY are able to, allocate correctly into this function versus the other functions versus the capital agenda more broadly of the firm, and how we're advising some of our clients to do the same thing.
So, Greg, I'll ask one question, and then Neerav, I invite you to present your perspective. So, Greg, one of the things that we have seen in partnering is sometimes you are the orchestrator, and sometimes you are participating in somebody else's orchestration. So you become the orchestrated, as you mentioned, right? And
Yes.
this is very true in large companies and small companies. Sometimes your core business value is orchestrator, even as a small business, a small company. And sometimes you have to play in somebody else's orchestration to tap into customer value creation. And a prime example of this is even very large companies today are tapping into the cloud companies like Amazon, Microsoft, or Google to participate in the value orchestration those public clouds are doing as things get migrated to the public cloud. And there you have to play a role in co-selling with Amazon, or co-selling with Microsoft, or co-selling with Google. And then as you're co-selling with these large companies, you become part of the orchestrated. And often my observation here is that it's very easy to articulate the return on capital or the value that is accumulating to the company for a much lower cost basis if you participate effectively in somebody else's ecosystem that is being orchestrated, right? And so those investments in co-selling with some other companies might be one of the initiatives that the partnering teams would look into this year as they demonstrate value and shift towards this value orchestration framework.
Yeah, so great points. So yes, I'm smiling because, of course, we in the professional services side want to be the orchestrator, and of course, our friends at Microsoft and SAP and elsewhere believe they're the orchestrators, and we're the orchestrated, right? And sometimes we are. It's actually kind of goes back and forth, right? Here's how I actually work through that. Is I go, look, whether you think you're the orchestrator or I think I'm the orchestrator, great. At the end of the day, when we show up to the client, have we co-invested in something that's unique, distinct, reduces time to value, reduces risk, provides a higher value outcome for the client? And how are we co-investing working capital together to build those things. It can't just be route to market. It can't just be, oh, we're there recommending each other. They got a great product. They got great services. That's not value to a client. Sorry, it's really not. So for me, regardless of who thinks they're being orchestrated and who thinks they're orchestrating, sometimes it's more of a co-orchestrated model. And the real measure is the working capital that you jointly put together to create distinction, and the effectiveness with which you go to market together, the effectiveness of the motion, and the win rates that you generate as a result of those motions. But the other point I would make is, this goes back to, the C-suite. What is your business strategy relative to an orchestration model? Where as a business do you want to be an orchestrating entity? And where as a business do you want to participate in business models orchestrated by others? Not that different than the value chain model today, but the difference is in the value chain model, who am I supplying to and who am I buying from is really the question. But in the orchestration model, it's the former.
Superb, superb, superb. In orchestration, your identity is visible to the end customer, right? Whereas in a supply chain model,
you're invisible.
The company is invisible. So
That's right.
It's really vital to a company for long-term success if you want to be visible to the customer and capture that value from the customer, like you showed in your slides. This shift in philosophy in partnering is amazingly important to do. Nirav, would you have a question that you want to follow up here?
Absolutely. So I think let switch topics. And Greg, I know you've talked about this in some of your other papers, or in fact demonstrated that as well, both internally with EY as well as with your customers. So, today's modern technology and outcome-centric paradigms that, you just talked about, are leading to very unique ecosystem models, right? I mean, these are not old generational one-to-one partnerships, but, those that involve cross-industry partnerships or collaboration, or you talked about 7 ecosystem models, etc., which fundamentally, co-create and deliver value both internally to the firm, to your partners, and most importantly, to the customers as well. So how should organizations of today and tomorrow, and equally importantly, the community here, the chief partner officers and the leaders, be on that cutting edge to look out for this a plethora of business models, and then imbibe and incorporate that within their organizations? Long story short, I think it's a complex world, right? So, how do you kind of pick which model works for you best? And then, how do you kind of be on the cutting edge so that you're driving value to the customers and competitive advantage to your firms as well? So any insights for you from the leaders here?
Yeah, here's how we think about it, and we advise CEOs to think about it. Instead of thinking about your product or service and who you can sell it to, think about the segment of the market that you want to orchestrate value for. What is that value? Why is it distinct? Why would they care? Why would they buy it from you? And the partners that you orchestrate to deliver that value. Once you identify those targets, then look at the available partners you already have or new partners that you need to create in order to create that value proposition. That's probably going to be more than one partner. Right? There's very little that's distinct and unique and solves a value journey for a customer or a value outcome for a customer that is just two companies, a tech company, a professional services company, or a pharma company and a tech company or whatever, right? So but what you want to do is you want to create that little orchestrated model to be as compact as possible, because N is your enemy. The more numbers you have of partners in anything, the more difficult it gets to orchestrate, right? So there's a balance between, you want to create distinction and you want to cover that value end to end, but you don't want to do it with 50 partners because that's not sustainable. My rule of thumb is if you get beyond like 7 or 8 partners to create a unique value proposition, you probably should rethink the boundaries of the value proposition or how you're thinking about creating it. Then those partners need to come together. And this goes back to the point I made earlier about capital valuation, right? We're getting much better at valuing things like the value of data, the value of IP, the value of brand, the value of routes to market, routes to circularity, et cetera. So when you think about forming these multi-party partnerships and orchestrating them if you're in the orchestration role, or even if you're in the orchestrated role, right? How do you make sure that the risk and the value that you're putting in to the ultimate outcome to the end client is being repaid in a return on capital that's acceptable? But you can't just think of it as revenue flows anymore. You also have to say, listen, I'm getting access to data, which I can then use to drive insights, to drive ancillary benefits for my company, or I'm getting access to customers that I would never even sniff at participating in this model. They would never know my brand but for participating in this model. Or I have routes to circularity where I now can reduce my green tax burden in Canada and Belgium and France and wherever these green taxes are. I mean, there's all sorts of things that you can look at in these partner models, but you always start with who is the end client? What is the value outcome that we're driving? What's the minimum viable set of partners? If I'm orchestrating, how do I do it effectively? And then all of us, whether the orchestrator or orchestrated, how are we calculating value exchange, not just as money, but as all of the forms of value, so that we can get the appropriate return on capital, risk adjusted, for the effort that we're all putting in to create this value proposition to begin with.
Hey, Greg, that's a perfect tee off to one of the audience questions that I'll introduce now. And Chip, could you be here to take more questions from the audience? So one of the questions I see is from Craig Gisberg. This point to the point you were just making about articulating the value that is being delivered. And I have a perspective here, but would love to hear your point of view on how to characterize it from soft to hard.
Yeah. So there's two answers. One, to the extent that you can do these orchestration models where you're creating unique things in the market that wouldn't exist but for the partnering, it's not over. I mean, it's not influence revenue anymore. It's incremental revenue. It's new revenue. It's a new value proposition, right? So that's one way to do it. Now, it's not always possible to do that because all of us still have our legacy sort of channel and route to market types of relationships as well. So there, the way I've gotten past the quote stigma and suspicion of overlay is I have published a number of metrics internally. One of them, at least in our business, is that we know that all things being equal, our win rate on a typical deal when we get down to the final 3 or 4 in a selection process is probably about 30%. When we are in a partnering model, even if it's a bilateral model with SAP selling a finance transformation, our win rates go up by 20 points. And when we're selling against that, one of our competitors in that same situation is co-selling with SAP or being endorsed by SAP or any partner, it doesn't matter who, it goes back down by 20 points. That's a 40-point spread. And then you can show mathematically what that does. The other thing I also point out is, in our particular company, there are certain companies we cannot partner with because we audit them, and it would create a mutuality of interest to partner with them. That's not appropriate for our job as auditors. So I also have a direct comparator. I can show that where we do work in non-SAP technologies, where we're the auditor, we are a fraction of the win rate and size of where we are doing it with SAP in finance transformation or supply chain transformation. It doesn't matter. So I actually have a means of demonstrating this, and then I can calculate that back up to, listen, it's, the relationship for, finance transformation drives 90% incrementality, right? I can demonstrate that. When we're doing these unique, distinct value propositions, it's 100%. And then we have others where it's 50%. And again, I've used metrics, math, I've used analysis, I've used comparisons to competitors, et cetera. And I've gotten agreement on these multipliers and factors so that, so we have 7.5 billion of partner revenue. How much of that is incremental? The answer is over 6.
Superb. And just to round up my observations, Greg, marketing went through a similar stigma last decade, and we can take some lessons from how marketing was able to generate hard metrics around marketing sourced leads or pipeline or referrals, which sales was not directly sourcing and they got credit for it. And then the incremental win rate from marketing influenced pipeline, which is exactly what you talked about. When you co-sell with SAP, your incremental win rates are entirely visible in the math across the pipeline that closed this quarter. Right.
Yeah. Although it's interesting you mentioned deal flow, right? Sourcing. Interestingly, I do not put as much value on sourcing. I do not expect my partners to, quote, bring us deals any more than I expect to bring them deals. I believe if we have a value proposition that we're appropriately marketing, the deals will flow to us. And I don't care which side of the relationship it flows to, as long as at the end of the day, we're co-selling it. That's really what I care about. Are we selling the distinct value that we've created? If we are, we're going to win. And if we're not, it doesn't matter how it was sourced.
Excellent points. And I think this might be a great point to close this conversation. Greg, fantastic insights. The shift in the way of thinking from being a service function to a value orchestrator, I think is one of the fundamental theories that is powering ecosystem as a strategic growth vector in today's market. And thank you for leading that and articulating it for the rest of us.
Thank you again for having me. It's been terrific.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. This was fantastic. Really appreciate you sharing so many insights and answering questions. And we could go for the rest of the day here on this topic. So really, really great. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay. We're going to go next to Ria Shanmugam and Amit. So let's
absolutely. What a fantastic session with Greg. There were so many questions we didn't get a chance to get into. So I'll invite Greg to answer them in the community, especially around the role of data and analytics and the orchestrated versus orchestrator challenges that people face. But it's my distinct pleasure to welcome Ria Shanmugam to the ecosystem community here. She's Group Vice President for Ecosystems and Channels and Alliances at New Relic, and somebody who's led and birthed ecosystem-led growth at New Relic. So warm welcome to you, Ria.
Amit, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So we just heard from Greg about the ecosystem business model and ecosystem strategy. So you've kind of lived and breathed it at New Relic. Talk a little bit about why New Relic had to go to an ecosystem strategy.
If I'm being brutally honest, Amit, we have no other choice but to go to an ecosystem strategy. And we've had this conversation many times offline. Just like Greg, as he was talking about his experiences working with channel leaders and CEOs across the board, we start, and I've also been largely in the direct sales world as opposed to being in the channel world. And when we started, we, just like most companies, we started with a classic reseller motion and a classic SI motion. And what we realized along the way, and I came in with largely first principle thinking, because I didn't know how channels have been operating for a really long time, because I've always been partners with the partner team, not necessarily been in a partner role myself. So I tried to mimic what worked in the past. And clearly what we found out over the last year and a half or two was that just is not going to be the way the partner world is going to work. And that's not how we drive value for our customers and for ourselves. So to answer your question, the simplest way to answer it is I don't know that there's any other way to do business with partners without the ecosystem.
Fantastic. And as New Relic was growing, you created and orchestrated an ecosystem-led motion there. Talk about your team, your challenges as you approach this. What was the perspective that you brought that changed the game, and how did you lead this change?
So first things first, when I came on board, obviously the first 2 or 3 months has really been understanding the landscape of where we are and what our partner ecosystem looked like, what the impact of the business was in driving revenue. And as many of you know, this is actually indirect or overlay model as it's portrayed in many companies. So the challenge is always, okay, what value are you actually driving, and what processes are you actually orchestrating, and all of that. So for me to really understand the data, and then we had to go in front of the board to say, this is the plan for the partner strategy, and here's how we are driving it. And we are a product company. New Relic is an observability company. We are a product company, and we do not have a professional services team in-house. So our strategy to deliver services to our customers is largely through partners. So for that, we also had to groom an ecosystem of partners that can understand observability, that can be thought leaders, that can go deliver services. So when we went to the board, we told our board that we can't be operating in a model where we could just be working with partners that can do resell for us. We have to be working with a set of partners that can understand, that can develop the technical mind share, that can deliver services that also happen to resell our products. And that's the kind of partners that we wanted to go after. And in the consumption world, as you know, it doesn't work if you go and resell your products and you're out the door for 12 or 24 months until the next renewal happens, and then for you to come in and do the renewals again. So for us, it was really important that we are working with partners that continue to stay engaged, that continue to help grow consumption, value adoption, customers using our products, NPS scores going up, the whole deal. We sort of had to extend what our internal go-to-market sales teams are doing, or SCs are doing, and our CSMs are doing through our partner ecosystem. So we said we're going to focus on quality over quantity, but we are going to build for scale. But the kind of partners that we are going to invest in is going to be partners that can bring both the services and the sales mindset to the business. What we realized very quickly was, when we go and develop those set of partners, there are a set of partners that have an appetite to do both. But if you go and nurture a set of technical partners, they always want to lead with services. They don't really care for sales. And then when you go in for scale, to the likes of SHIs and the CDWs of the world, they're all about the scale. They can put more boots on the ground than any company single-handedly can. But at the same time, they don't have the technical mindset and the mind share necessarily as deep as we want it to be, to be able to do that. So then we said, okay, we can't do this without an ecosystem of partners that can drive the value that we want to drive if we are truly building an extension of our own internal teams. So it's been a journey. From the get-go, we didn't know we were going to build an ecosystem. From the get-go, we knew what we wanted out of our partners, but we didn't realize that that's not going to be from a specific set of partners. It's got to be the ecosystem coming together. The customer is right in the middle of everything, and then the value creation happens from us as the product company, and then from various types of partners bringing that value, including our cloud providers that are massive marketplaces that have the reach and scale, and let alone the massive cloud commitments our customers have and want to burn through their cloud commitments working with product companies and services companies. So it was certainly a journey. We didn't start off by saying we're going to build a partner ecosystem or we are driving ecosystem-led growth. I think the story sort of evolved as we learned, and failed many times, but very quickly so, to learn from those and move on.
Yeah, it's absolutely exemplary the way you've led with hyperscalers like AWS, and now with Microsoft and potentially more coming forward. The way we've orchestrated value with service partners, and this is where I think there's a lot of good comments in the community here about transcending types and tiers of partners. I think that's something that you guys have led and done very well. So meet partners and their business models where they are at, and then create value together. But this must be really hard, right? Systems are not easy, especially around ecosystem automation. So how you've gone about kind of thinking about people, process, and data within New Relic?
I think this is a time, and I don't know that the industry has seen such a huge paradigm shift in how we do partners like where we are now. We possibly have seen this one almost 10 years ago when cloud became a thing. That was the new shiny object. And then everybody figured out how to do partnering with cloud. I think we're going through one more of that now. And I stay in close touch with my peers in the industry to see how what's working for them and what can we learn from each other. And not many of them are too far or too different from where we are, which is we're all trying little things and we're all trying to figure out, okay, I think this is more effective to measure the impact and this is more effective to drive growth, right? So one thing that's really important, Amit, and I think you and I have talked about this, is the ability to have a team on the ground that has the grit and the willingness to fail, the willingness to operate in an unstructured thinking out of the box. And it cannot be the way we have done partners in the past. It absolutely cannot be the way we've done partners in the past. So for us, it was really important for us to have a team that were leaders in their own right and are able to willing to experiment and fail, and are also wanting to be part of this monumental shift that we are going through in where we are. So that was really important. It's by no means easy, if I'm keeping it real. It's been so bloody hard over the past 18 months to 2 years. But we've learned quite a bit. We have evolved our strategy quite a bit. We haven't written our strategy document at one point, and then we said we're going to stick through the strategy because we quickly realized that the strategy has to evolve and how we operate has to evolve. So I've been I'm incredibly grateful for the team's grit as we persevere through all these changes and as we continue to evolve.
Fantastic. And I think this ecosystem mindset and the kind of new people that are coming into the ecosystem profession is just mind-blowing. We are seeing people who are picking this as a profession, picking this consciously as a profession, learning the new ways of doing it. And that has created a lot of change. You've also focused a lot on ecosystem automation, like the process automation layer. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So to your point about bringing people on to the partner world or the ecosystem, like I said, this is my first official channels gig, but I can tell you, Amit, this is probably one of the most holistic jobs I've had. And Greg touched on this briefly, largely because one, you're working with a whole ecosystem of partners outside of your company, and you're nurturing and growing and building relationships and trust and, sort of that value exchange between two companies to build that. And the second part of it is all internal, but you've got to build the confidence internally within your sales and technical sales teams to be the biggest champions of partners from the outside in. And then you're working with marketing, and then you have operations that are different for partners, deal strategy, monetization, legal, fine. I mean, it's the whole deal. So it is one of the most holistic jobs that I have had personally. So for folks considering opportunities in the ecosystem, this is a great place to be getting that holistic skill set if you're looking for that. And as Greg said, there's a notion of, oh, this is an overlay business, and it's harder to prove value and show the impact. I certainly don't think so, especially in the evolution that we're going through. But it leads me to answer your question, which is the complexity of what you need to navigate as you work through a whole slew of external ecosystem of partners and every function within the company that touches partners one way or another. So then what becomes really crucial is for all of you to see the same set of data, all of you to see a workflow of things that are happening and how partners engage with our internal teams and how we look at the same shared goals and what are we trying to accomplish together. And I think what can get lost in all of this chaos and massiveness in the complexity is the value that we're driving for the one entity that is the most important entity, which is the customer. So automation becomes crucial. And I think that's sort of how you and I met, Amit, which is we were right in the thick of solving some of the challenges, building our ecosystem of partners. And we said, we're going to focus on quality over quantity. And we were going after less than 100 partners, honestly, over the last 12 months. And even that was really chaotic and complex for us to manage, and we were dying in spreadsheet chaos and management of our business plans or shared goals or processes.
Yep.
How are we exchanging people, processes, content? And you touched on there is legal sensitivity, but there is also competitive sensitivity as you exchange that information with your partners. So you sort of have to see the same data and the same goals through a unified set of perspectives. And that's where automation is key. And that's where you're not necessarily working within a company. You're actually working across hundreds of companies at this point. So what can be shared, what can't be? And you need to have the shared perspective and data to drive the right value for the customer. So that's why I think automation is really important. And I think that's why we have been working very closely together.
Absolutely. And you've shown tremendous progress to your board. You've been data-driven, you've been process-driven. I want to pivot a little bit to my last question, which is around economic environment that you see around here. Needless to say, people must have come here and talk to you about how did you make the case for your leaders to reinvest in partnerships this year in particular?
So there are two reasons why every company does partners, and the two most obvious reasons, right? One is obviously driving the value. But as you think about why do I want to invest in a partner team, the first one is there is no company in this entire world that can put enough boots on the ground to sell their products and services within their company. So the first thing that you're looking for is scale and reach through your partners and the relationships that they have with the large enterprises, small and medium businesses, different verticals, different countries, and so on. The scale and reach is one thing. And the second one is your cost of acquisition and the cost of sale that comes along with bringing $1 into the company through your direct sales team versus bringing $1 into the team through the indirect ecosystem of partners. So as economic climates become challenging and interesting for companies, the way I think about this, and then this is sort of the conversation that our CFO and I have, which is how do we think about our cost of acquisition and cost of sale? And the most interesting and important thing to think about is we need the foundation. You can't really pull a rabbit out of your hat if you don't lay the right foundation to bring in that cost of acquisition and sale down and get the reach. So you've got to invest in the foundation building that you need to get to that. But once you have that, it's very evident that your cost of acquisition and sale is lower, and the cost to maintain that dollar and the cost to renew that dollar is lower because you have this whole ecosystem of partners working on your behalf, selling and servicing and trying to create the value for the customer on the other side of the company. Whereas with your direct sales team, obviously that is the higher cost activity. So what I have seen, interestingly, is there's more investment in the partner teams as we see economic challenges.
Yep. Thank you, Ria, for that perspective. You've been a tremendous role model, Ria, for both men and women, a tremendous champion for women. And there's a lot of interest in ecosystems and partnerships and people coming into this profession. What advice would you have for somebody who's just starting out in this journey, in this career?
Yeah, I mean, I think I touched on this, Amit. Thank you for your kind words. It's been one of the most satisfying yet holistic jobs I have had, for the very reason that I pointed out, which is you are championing your company and your products and services to a whole world out there, outside of your company. Passionately selling and driving value and building that relationship, building the trust and credibility to be working together as one with your partner ecosystem. But internally, you're also working with possibly every function that there is out there to drive that together. So if you think about it, you're sort of operating in a general manager capacity, or sort of operating your own incubation of a company within the company, because you've got to bring all of it together, but this time around for the partner ecosystem. So one thing, interestingly, that we did at New Relic is, as we shifted our perspective to how we think about partners, asked my leaders that, I'd like to incubate marketing, for example. So we had partner marketing that used to report into our corporate marketing team. And I said, the goals and the KPIs that we are measuring our partner marketing teams are not necessarily aligned with what I want to drive with partner marketing, especially as we are going through this shift and transformation within the industry. So I'd like to incubate partner marketing within alliances and channels. So my goals and the marketing goals are better aligned to drive that change. So it really depends on the maturity of where you are in your company, right? If you are in a company where you are still defining what that value looks like, what those KPIs look like, what you're driving, I think you sort of bring those into an incubation mode and set the strategy forward right with the right KPIs to measure the value and the impact that you're driving. Greg said something that was just, I actually took note of it. He said something that's so obvious, but it's often not talked about, which is there is so much of work in processes and operations and data, and all of that goes behind the scenes to make the partner engine work as a growth engine. But it's often not seen because you don't talk about it. You don't communicate that. You don't talk about it. And it's our jobs to make sure that those are better communicated and more visible so people understand the value of what the teams are driving. But at the same time, as people come into a partner opportunity and jobs within this function, it really is what drives you. And there are some that are very structured and organized and all of that, where operations might be a better fit, versus as you think about driving more holistically, running a geography in driving something like that, brings you a more holistic perspective. So I've certainly enjoyed working with every aspect of the company and the functions that I've interacted with.
Fantastic. The GM experience that you talk about is just unbeatable. We have a lot of good questions from the community. I wonder how many I'll be able to take here. So a lot of good interest. So Chip, can you highlight one or two questions, please?
Yeah, I thought this was an interesting one from Craig Ginsburg. So do alliances and channels org sit in sales or in product or somewhere else? Good one.
I report into a CRO, and so he has responsibility for global sales and tech sales and enablement and the whole deal. I report into a CRO, and the way that it's organized at New Relic is we have sales leaders in each of the geos and the technical sales leaders that align with each of the geos, and I have equivalent geography leaders within each geos that run the partner business. So I partner with our CRO to drive the overall strategy. How should we think about, cloud marketplaces, resellers, GSIs, ISVs, the whole deal. And then the execution happens at the geo level as they work with the individual geos. So I certainly sit in the, I certainly sit in the sales team. And I don't know that the partner team being organized in the product team is of much value based on my personal experience. Yeah, like I'm thinking what could be unique about having that team report into product. And I don't know that that's the best home based on my experience. The best home is certainly sales, because you need the tightest collaboration possible with your sales counterparts as they work with your customers, and that's where you get.
And I think this inflection around customer value orchestration is coming out because now partners are visible to the end customer, as Mike had remarked, right? So that makes sense. Perhaps in co-creation, you can collaborate with product organizations and
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Collaboration is great. The one thing that I always tell my team is, as you sit in like business reviews and as you present to your leaders, as partner leaders, I can say the most amazing things about the value and the impact that the partners are driving. But I certainly hold back because I want my sales leaders and my technical sales leaders to talk about the impact and the value that our partners are driving, because that's most definitely very valuable for our leaders to hear, because as sales teams start to realize the value and the impact that partners are driving, that's very impactful.
So another good question from Baz, Priya, in the context of Greg's earlier observation that the world is evolving towards outcome-based value propositions. Do you see the same? And what could that mean for New Relic? Is there, for example, an orchestration as a service offering possible?
Yeah, so absolutely outcome-based value propositions. I am all for it. Not necessarily in this role, but that's certainly something that's critical as we drive impact. And one of the things that I often tell my team is, okay, what are we, if you're putting a new program in place, if you're putting a new project in place, we will boil it down to what's the one thing that ultimately matters as we work through this. And then as we start the meeting or as we start the discussion towards an initiative, we will line up 10 or 15 different things that we want to measure and the KPIs around it. And then we start to ask the question of, okay, so why does this matter? Oh, this matters because then they can go build pipeline. Okay, why does that matter? Okay, this matters because we need to bring teams together to create that engagement. And then it ultimately boils down to like one or two things. And every initiative that we drive ultimately boils down to one or two things. As much as measuring progress along the journey is important, I certainly tend to keep the team really, really focused on the end goal, because I don't want our teams to be distracted by the journey so much that we lose track of where we are going. So one of the things that certainly drives that behavior is keeping the end outcome in mind. And sometimes I joke with my immediate leadership team saying, if I wake you up in the middle of the night, what are the three things that are absolutely important to us? And I'll have them repeat it as a joke. But it is true. And they've started to do it with their teams too, which is like, what are the three things that we're all absolutely driving?
Yeah.
And we all should be remembering this, because if you keep track of too many things, that gets lost in chaos. So outcome-based metrics are certainly important, but it shouldn't be 30 different KPIs that are measuring those outcomes. It should be the one or two or three things. And ideally, those are aligned with what your CRO is driving. It should be aligned with what the CEO is driving. And that's where you get the best alignment.
Fantastic.
Perfect.
There's so many good questions here, Ria. There's one more from Jennifer. When you see that your program is reducing support and renewal costs, how are you communicating and capitalizing on that to deepen relationship? Do you use metrics and tools like MDF, for example?
We certainly use WorkSpan, and we're actually experimenting with what that new process will look like as we think about some of that. One of the things that we are experimenting with right now is how we resource our partner-based business. We're actually in incubation mode right now. We have a model that's well oiled and works really well now, but we are having some challenges to say, I'm going to put a pin on this one metric to say this drastically decreases the cost of sale, decreases the cost of renewal. So we're actually experimenting a people model, right? So and I go a little bit deeper, but I think it helps drive the point home, which is when you assign opportunities, when you have AEs in your sales teams assigned to accounts, it depends on which segment the AEs operate in. Sometimes in strategic segments, an AE is assigned to 1-to-1 or 1-to-3, versus in a enterprise segment, there'll be 1-to-10, 1-to-15, depending on the size of the accounts. One of the ways in which you sort of reduce the cost of acquisition and sale, you certainly need the relationship directly with the customer. You certainly need the function of an AE with the customer directly. But you can't be sprinkled across all of your sales segment, because then a specific set of accounts that are partner led, that are sourced and closed by the partner, needs less attention and less time from your internal teams. And as you put really expensive resources from your own company on those accounts, then you're losing the time and value that they could be driving in your more strategic accounts where there is no partner involved. One of the reasons why you have a partner ecosystem is because they understand your business, they know how to drive value, they know how to deliver services, they can be the thought leader, they can be you, they can be the voice of you in those instances. So what we're experimenting with is what kind of resourcing model makes sense on the sales side to drive that scale and expansion, which then becomes obvious, because then when you're measuring your partner business, your AE to customer ratio is not 1 to 10 or 1 to 50. It's actually 1 to 200 because majority of the account management happens on the partner side. And you're merely being the voice of your company for the customer should they need you. But you don't necessarily have to be at the customer door every day managing that account. That's the whole beauty of having that ecosystem doing work on your behalf.
Wow, what an insight there. I think this thing around partner-led model, we will have another conversation on this topic. I promise to bring you back because this is a massive transformation in process. With that, Chip, let's close the session. Ria, thank you so much, and thank you to the community for asking so many questions. There's a lot here, Ria. I'll send it to you. We'll get your answers offline and write a blog probably.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me, Amit.
This is fantastic, Ria and Amit. Great job, and so many valuable lessons, and really appreciate you sharing, Ria.
Thanks, Chip.
Yeah. Okay, let's next up. Let's bring in Marie and Teresa. So welcome, guys.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Chip. So in the time that we have left, I think what we really want to cover here with Marie, who Chip introduced at the beginning of the session. She is the Senior Director of Software Partner Monetization and Success at SAP. And really what we want to talk about is the transformation that you've gone through at SAP on the digital side regarding co-selling. So I think the best place to start, Marie, is really what have you built at SAP at a high level, and what does that process look like? What did you do to structure it? How did you operationalize it? Summarize those big hills in a short, condensed format for us so we can hear kind of what you went through. It was a long journey, right? How do you distill that down for us? Oh, I think you're muted. There you are.
Not again. A big hello from my side, and hello to everybody out there. Thanks for the warm welcome, Teresa. And yeah, we have been on a great journey. To answer your question, Teresa, I just want to focus a little bit on creating a little bit of context of sort of which piece of the partner puzzle at SAP I'm talking about, or we're going to be talking about over the next few minutes. So, I mean, essentially, SAP has 4 engagement models with partners. We have the hosters, the run partners, as we call them, the service partners, the resellers, and the 4th engagement model is the build partners. Now, these partners are essentially partners that are building their own solutions that fit on top of SAP or that integrate with SAP technology. And the build partner segment comprises of a partner progression, as we call it, that focuses on different partner tiers within that progression. So we have the spotlight and validated partners that are sort of the volume, low touch segment. And on the other side of the scale, we have Solex and SAP endorsed apps partners, which are invitation only partner models, and obviously much higher touch. And it's the SAP endorsed apps partner model that we're talking about here, and for which we've implemented this co-sell process. And I mean, the partner model is fresh, right? It's in its infancy. It was launched about 3 years ago, coming up for 3 years ago. So we had a clean slate. We didn't have a legacy system to migrate from, or legacy processes or anything that we had a clean slate, and we had some clear ideas of what we wanted to do. So it was clear, spreadsheets. No, people know spreadsheets. People are comfortable with spreadsheets, but that's not the path that we can take. We need to digitize. We need to digitize, and we need to automate what we're doing. And if I can take just a moment to explain what that means in our co-sell world, it's about creating visibility to the pipeline. We work on the premise that if you don't see it, you can't manage it. So how do you visualize this? What do you visualize? You've got an SAP AE on the SAP side selling. You've got the partner AE on the partner side selling, and they're working with their respective CRM systems. We have no interest in doing more CRM. That exists. So what we want is for our alliance team that is orchestrating this co-sell model, that is sitting in between the AEs, if you will. We want them to be able to have an extract of SAP's pipeline and an extract of the partner pipeline, and sidle up that information, those data points, next to each other, so that at a minimum, what somebody needs to do is to go into Workspan and pull the report or look at a sales view, a sales plan view, and just consume the data. Really quickly discern, are we aligned on these opportunities that need to close this quarter? Are there discrepancies? If there are, go and action on those. So that's essentially, in a tiny little nutshell, what we've built, Teresa.
Which is great. So that visibility, I have to believe that visibility increases velocity, which is great. But to get there, you probably had to cross through some hurdles. What were some of the things that were challenges that you had to overcome? And what are some of the things that you think worked well throughout the course of your journey?
Okay, I'll start on the second half, on the worked well piece. I think another premise that we had across the board as we set this up was standardization. This is a program that needs to grow exponentially towards our biggest goal in 2025. Everything that we do needs to be kind of programmatized and just be able to roll off the shelf. So standard processes, being super prescriptive about how we do this co-sell model, and sticking by it, fairly rigidly, not deviating is something that we did from the get-go. What that helps with is creating simplicity. So I think we all know this feeling of needing to do something in a system where the processes are cumbersome. It's kind of like almost with a dreaded fear. Oh my God, I've got to go and do that again. That's not the feeling that we wanted we wanted to deliver value to people so that they can do their jobs better. So keeping the process simple, sticking to the essence of the likely answers that they will be looking for in Workspan, was also key. So we're not overloading anything that we do. And I mean, the knock-on effect of that is that acceptance and adoption goes relatively quickly. I mean, as Ria just said, the ecosystem that we're talking about, it's internally, but there are all the partner teams that we are serving with what we're doing. And so making sure that adoption and acceptance of this brand new process works, is helped by the simplicity and by the standardization that we set out to kind of instill.
That's excellent. So just making it really accessible, it sounds like you made sure that you incorporated that into how you built things. Making it accessible makes it, and keeping it simple makes it easier for people to adopt and to see that it's making their lives easier. So that sort of fear of change or the ability to adopt isn't inhibited because you're not burdening people with this huge monster. It's a simple way of looking at things and makes it accessible and meets people where they are, it sounds like.
That's right. Yeah.
Great.
You did ask about some of the hurdles that we faced, and I think the biggest hurdle that we faced was that we couldn't do everything at once. So we needed to get going really, really quickly. The program was out there. This business backbone system needed to be up and running even sooner than we were able to get it up and running. So we weren't able to do everything at once, despite giving it a good shot. So I mean, the things that we're doubling down on right now are our scale. We kind of baked scale into it from the beginning, and it's served us well. But now we need to kind of double down on that and get even more scale into it. We need to automate more. Workspan has some great features out there to support automation, and we need to use them more to be able to get the data to do more work on its own. And then, I mean, yeah, we're in an emerging space, and we were early adopters in an emerging space. We're going back 3 years now. So at the time when we adopted Workspan, Workspan's architecture was what's referred to as 1X, and we are still on 1X, even though Workspan's architecture has evolved. So we're facing a little bit of the pain of being the early adopters, and we need to migrate, which is a big undertaking, but it will reap benefits down the line. So it's a bit of a pain point right now, but we'll get through it and reap those benefits.
Yeah, I know. It's funny when you want to be on that sort of cutting edge of technology, but there is that pain associated with being an early adopter, which I think you captured well. You're in an emerging space, you're defining process, you're working with technology, and digital transformation is a big overhaul, no matter how you slice it. And then incorporating that into an emerging space has its challenges, but clearly 3 years into it, I think you've had great success. And I want to emphasize one of the points that you covered, which is you've leveraged the system and the data and the process to enable scale, but you're at the precipice of a next kind of hill, which is scale at scale, right? So I think, we're entering almost a new economic climate, and so many companies, in particular in technology, are being asked to do more with less. And so you touched on a couple of points. I want to unpack that a little bit. How do you see technology kind of meeting some of those demands? And you talked about getting the data to work for you. What are some of your thoughts around how you continue to increase that scale? Is it about process? Is it about optimization and fine tuning the technology? What are some of your thoughts on that scale at scale?
Yeah, so I mean, it's more automation. I mean, where customers or companies are facing tough economic times. If headcount isn't going to grow, if budgets are being cut, yet goals are still lofty, you have to help people to get there. It can't be on the back of the people. So my take on that is just reap the power of the process. I talk about getting the data, putting the data to work. You have to be clear about what data you're bringing into systems. If you're bringing something in, it's serving a purpose. How can it potentially serve a better purpose? And as I say, if in this case, as Workspan is providing additional functionality to help the data do more work, then it's a continuous improvement of the process. And I think Greg touched on it as well. He seemed to suggest, at EY internally, their processes are they're done. They are so automated, and so, but there are all the partner processes out there. So it's also a case of, this co-sell motion is getting processes on your side and the partner side to work in sync, and that's a journey, and being able to do that at scale is a challenge, and that's exactly the one that we're working on.
Yeah, that's great. So yeah, I think you're right. Focus on the automation, and I think starting with that simplification and building a solid foundation allows you to continue to build on the automation that you've already built, which is great. I think one of the things that, just shifting gears for a second here, you know, success is a part of your job title, right? And this kind of co-selling motion is what you've really focused on. Describe your personal journey to me, because I love to hear why this is exciting to people. Why is this exciting to you? Why are you still doing this, you know, 3 years into it? How did it shape how you look at the business, and why is it still exciting? Like, what gets you out of bed? Why is this still fun and exciting for you?
I mean, it's fun and exciting because it's an emerging space. You know, it's an emerging space. Amit talked about it. I think everyone has spoken about it up until now. This is the decade of the ecosystem. There is so much to do out there. So that in and of itself makes it exciting. I mean, I think I've said, you know, it's been great to kind of prepare for this conversation, Teresa, because it's helped me to look back. To see, you know, what we've achieved, and if you ponder on it, it's you know, we have achieved a lot. What I tend to look at is the path ahead and see, you know, what we still have to do. And I mean, that is clearly what gets me going. There is still so much for us to do. There's so much potential for us to unlock there, both for you know, for these alliances and everybody's business involved in our partnering in the build space. But there's another thing that is slightly less sort of business relevant. But I read a wonderful book recently called Humankind by someone called Rutger Bregman, and he as the title suggests, you know, he tries to put a very positive spin on our species. And I think I was lacking a little bit of that. I probably needed, like, the coming out of COVID and lockdowns. It was good to get a little bit of a lift. And he basically proffers this idea that our human superpower is cooperation. Now, I would have always argued that it's communication, but it's true. I mean, if it's a superpower, then, you know, some good should be derived out of it, and we don't always use communication for good, often, but not only. And so I was really fascinated by this idea that our ability as humans to cooperate, and, you know, in this world it means collaborate, actually is a superpower. So to think about creating these processes, creating what we're doing, defining this new model to help people to use their superpower actually better. Yeah, I find that really exciting, and that also helps me when I look at my day ahead to think, okay, this is pretty fun what we're doing.
Yeah, that's great. I love that, and I think you're right. And I mean, it all kind of ties back into where you started, which is defining clear processes that are easy for people to understand, and then leveraging that superpower of I love that idea, because I always lean to communication as well. So it's a really valid point that getting people to cooperate across the board only serves to drive us forward, and that results, of course, from a business perspective, in, you know, great metrics and increased revenue, and everybody wins. But I think it also makes us feel good to cooperate and to deliver something positive, and to see the results of what you've done. So yeah, we did chat about that, you know, in the prep. Like, sometimes you're so focused on what's next and what the challenges are next that we forget to stop and pause and look at what we've already accomplished and, you know, where we've come from, and then, you know, move forward to where we're going next. You know, if everyone was to take away, you know, 3 key points. So you've mentioned a couple of different things. You know, build a good process, meet people where they are so that they adopt. You know, I heard being aware that you're in a new space and an emergent space, and being able to adapt and kind of optimize in that space. I heard a couple of key things there. For the folks that are attending today, what to you are the top 3 things that people should pay attention to or prioritize as they're working within this emerging space and delivering to the ecosystem?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the standardization is key. That helps your process to deliver the power and deliver the value that people are looking for to make for them to be able to do their job better. I think another point is at a people level. So on the one hand, executive buy-in. I mean, we have a sort of a mandate as a partner organization from our executive board member for customer success, Scott Russell, to offer superior partner ecosystem experience through a well-defined collaboration model. Now, I mean, that is exactly what we're trying to do. And as we know, there's more to do, but that direct mandate plus the sponsorship from our more immediate executive level, we've had that from the beginning. It helps to drive the message in the ecosystem of why this is important, how it's going to work. So that's key. But equally at that people level, my internal customer is a key counterpart to me. He is the voice from the front line of the ecosystem. So unless of the wealth of things that we need to do and want to do, unless what I'm doing is 100% aligned to what is needed, I don't need to. And that's how we operate. We prioritize fiercely and serve the needs of our internal customer, essentially. And I mean, I can't emphasize it enough. I said we're doubling down on scale. We're doing scale at scale, but scale is just absolutely key. And it can be, it can mean many different things. What I mean by this is when you're defining your processes, ask that question. What does this mean for hundreds of people, for hundreds of partners using this process? How does that work when hundreds of partners use this process? How does it work when thousands of users are using the process? And the answers to those questions help you to discern whether what you're defining is good for scale.
That's great. Awesome. So executive buy-in, standardization, ensuring that you're delivering in a collaborative way to the people that will be consuming your process and your technology, and then being able to leverage what you've built to scale. Those are, and that's the very simplified Teresa summary of what you just said. but that's what I heard. So what are you most proud of as you look back over the course of the past couple of years and building all of this up? What's the thing that you're most proud of?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I've certainly enjoyed is the creative process. I mean, this is this isn't a process that existed before. So it's creative that excites me, and processes have been a thing that I've been working on since the start of my career. So that in and of itself is exciting for me. But I think, a creative process on its own isn't really worth much. So I think what I'm super grateful for is the ecosystem that has adopted it, that has embraced it, and it's change. We're not always fond of change. creatures of habit. It takes time for another habit to kind of become for something else to become a habit. So the trust that people have given us, in the face of just initially many questions, how is this going to work? Why does it work? How do I do it? Just that trust. Okay, I see how it works. I see it, and also the trust that they know that we're working on the things that still need to come. I think that's one of the great things that when I look back is great to hear and to see.
That's excellent. That's great. I love it. So those were kind of all the questions that I had for you. I don't know if we have any questions from the folks that are attending, or Marie, if there's anything else that you wanted to share that we didn't cover. Any other tips and tricks or lessons learned that you just wanted to put out there for the folks that are listening?
There was actually a question that came in on LinkedIn. It's not in our, it wasn't from our internal audience, so I can't put it up on the screen, but it's a good one. It says, hi Marie, how can you measure the success of co-selling programs, and what metrics should you use to evaluate performance?
Great question.
Yeah, this is a great question, and I mean, in as much as we use WorkSpan, we really focus on the pipeline. The metrics piece and the running of the business is something that the business teams do from their space. But I know that once we've made the architectural shift, that I was talking about, to 100x, we're going to be able to use the advanced metrics capability in WorkSpan. So I can keep you posted as to what we come up with as the sort of the bar of what partner managers can use to manage the efficacy of their business and how they're going against their business plan.
Terrific. Excellent.
Great.
Okay, I think this has been fantastic, Marie. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a joy.
Yep, this was fun, Marie. It was great to kind of take the look back down memory lane and then figure out what's next. We're excited to be on the journey with you and appreciate your time today. I've learned a lot just in our discussions and kind of getting ready for this session, and it's fun for me to hear it as somebody who works with all of our customers at WorkSpan. There's a lot that I try to take away from these conversations that will help people that are new to the space that can learn from you. So appreciate your time.
Thanks so much for having me.
Fantastic. Great. Okay, so thank you guys. Thank you, Marie, and thank you, Teresa. And I'm going to bring Amit back in we'll do a quick recap. So thank you guys. And let's see, we've been sort of keeping track of some of the highlights of what's been happening from our sessions. Great sessions, great thought leaders and practitioners as well, and it's been really valuable. So, Amit, you want to kick it off with Greg? Greg was fantastic. So many really insightful things.
I think it's important to communicate value up to CEOs and how we fit into the larger ecosystem-led business value creation exercise. So as companies orchestrate value, I think it was very clear. Either you are orchestrating or get orchestrated. And then the point of view that in value orchestration, partnering is something you've got to major in. It's not a minor. It's not an overlay. It's got something, you have got to be majoring in it. And I think that was that's important. And that kind of reflects into the chief partner officer role and having a core ecosystem automation that kind of funds and does that in a data-driven way. Because putting, as Marie said, right, putting data to work for you, having that scale, if you will, to deliver that ecosystem value is what Greg was talking about. So
it was really interesting. I also thought it was interesting, his sort of anecdote of when he first took on this role, and he was like, I don't know. I'm not sure about this partnering thing. and almost
Yeah.
like it was felt like it was initially like maybe it wasn't the place to be to make things happen, and then wow, did he
Yeah.
really
For
turn that
7
around?
years, EY has led the ecosystem team there has led amazing growth, coming from nowhere to upwards of 30 to 40% revenue contribution is just no mean feat, and
Yeah.
that's where EY scale. He's talking about impact at 7 to 8 billion on 8 to 9 billion and so on and so forth. That's huge impact through co-selling, through partnering better, having priorities. And I think the second thing that came across between Greg and Ria that I thought was interesting was it's not quantity, it's quality of partnerships. And I think as partners are evolving, they're paying attention to whether we or ecosystem leaders are paying attention to their changing business models. And what Ria did with New Relic and driving the ecosystem-led growth there and bringing different partner types and especially the services partners and kind of partnering with them effectively to drive boots on the ground, as she used those phrases. No one company can sell it all to the world, right? So I think bringing that influence from new buying centers, especially if you're lower down in the stack, how do you get value? Participating in those things, she did an awesome job kind of talking about more boots on the ground.
Yeah. Yeah, and I also like this sort of shift from purely just delivering products and services to really creating value and value orchestration with your partners. How are you managing all of that to deliver the ultimate end value to customers?
Absolutely. And I think if you look at both Ria and Maria are inspiring people for me personally. They are heroes for me because they've actually done it. They started with a vision. Marie talked about being a creative process and standardizing it and starting very early in the game. Like huge kudos to SAP and to Carl and to Marie and to the teams there who have done it both for GSIs but also for ISVs. They were literally one of the first companies to actually share data out with partners at scale on a policy-driven way with Workspan. And that journey was like 4 or 5 years ago, starting 3 years ago with the ISV team as well. And being an early mover in the space, look at the tremendous value that they've unlocked through the ecosystem, like 10x more ecosystem value as a result of that process, that standardization to share early. And now it creates that foundation that she was talking about. How do we scale the scale, right? She talks about the foundation and going from 1x to 100x, right? Being an early innovator and now kind of taking, as we launched the Workspan Co-Sell app today, extending what we had done before, but now it's productized in the way that you have standard process, standard metrics, standard reporting out there. And that gets you to kind of think of scale in a new way. But the executive buy-in that Marie talked about with Carl and Scott, for example, at SAP, that was so crucial. And this is what Greg was talking about. Do you have a team and an organization that is like Ria's, where the partner ecosystem leader is seen as contributing meaningfully to revenue and not seen as an overlay function? That's what changed in these two organizations at SAP and at New Relic. And because that changed, you can see the revenue multiplier that these organizations have shown.
And across so many different kinds of partners as well. Marie's in the endorsed apps, but it's also the Solex partners and technology partners, cloud partners, GSI partners, all being orchestrated together in a uniform way and building the processes. I love that Maria was talking. She's like a process champion and just always thinking about putting the right process in place to make sure that you're orchestrating not just your internal processes but also with your partners.
Indeed. And there's a lot of learnings out there that we'll hopefully invite Greg, Ria, and Marie to write a blog with us because there's so many questions that we didn't get to that really speak to the operational aspects of how we co-sell with companies. How do we treat partners as peers, see the world from their lens, and walk a mile in their shoes, if you will. And I think this gets us to a neutral place where we work with companies in service of end customers, right? And I think Greg, Ria, and Maria are great examples at different levels in the company that have shown tremendous impact working with colleagues. And I think I'm going to read this book called Humankind. And this is on my reading list now. The Superpower of Cooperation. And that's insightful. That's very insightful.
Well, this has been a fantastic EBS Ecosystem Business Summit, and thanks, thank you, Amit, for kicking us off, and for all of our guests, from Greg and Ria and Marie for joining us today, and thank you all for joining us for this couple of hours. And I think with that, by the way, we'd love to have you take our survey, and because we always want to improve and improve these sessions. And I think with that, I'll just say maybe Amit will wrap and say thank you all for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for giving us your time. Let's get the community together again in August, and we have some really exciting speakers lined up for that as well.
All right, thanks everybody for joining.
Take care. Thank you.